My role at KAUST is to manage the cybersecurity of the university and the city itself. And that is a challenging job because it is concerned with not only managing the university cybersecurity, but also the city around it. So you can think of it as an ISP and a university at the same time, because internet service providers, cybersecurity responsibilities are quite different from a university that is a little bit more structured than just a city. So responsibility that spans compliance, security compliance, governance, awareness and risk, and security operations, incident response and forensics, and also business continuity and disaster recovery, which is very key in this era of the crises. You have to really adopt a defense in depth approach, which is basically a layered approach to defending your the university from cybersecurity attacks, and that starts with perimeter security, but does not end with perimeter security. It ends with the human firewall, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But basically, the layers in between and technologies that are used to protect each layer in between are very important. Sometimes you may have redundant technologies, or you may need redundant technologies, because if one fails, the other can then take over and still protect you. So if you have a super duper firewall and your administrator can be social engineered, the firewall administrator can be social engineered into giving away their password, then the firewall is of no use. So it's extremely important to focus on the human element, which what we call the human firewall concept at KAUST. The concept is based on a risk-based approach, by which you need to constantly make your users aware of the cybersecurity threats around them. So instead of using a spray and pray approach, by which you spray training on everyone and pray that it would work, you would use a risk-based approach by creating a point system and giving a certain number of points, merit points and demerit points, for people who, let's say, they get demerit points if they violate an information security policy, if they fall for a phish, if they share their password, etc., etc. They get merit points for reporting a phish, for reporting an incident, for example, attending training or taking courses and quizzes on our LMS, the learning management system, etc. So these points add up, the demerit and merit points, and create what we call a risk score, a human firewall score for that person. The SecOps is the operations of the technical controls. So basically, we conduct risk managements all the time. And when you come up with certain risks and you evaluate these risks may be high, low, etc. If they are high and you need to mitigate them, they're higher than your risk appetite, you need to mitigate them. You basically introduce controls to mitigate these risks. And these controls could be technical, could be administrative. The technical controls themselves, let's say the firewalls, the intrusion prevention, intrusion detection systems, the web filtering systems, the web application firewalls, next generation firewalls, endpoint security systems, all of these technical controls are managed by the SecOps team. And they're basically responsible for their uptime, their operation, and for their properly functioning. If we were to start talking about the challenges that CISO does encounter without a crisis, there are many. Number one, there's politics. Usually, politics is very important to know how to maneuver through as a CISO. You need to understand how to speak the language of the business, as well as speaking the language of your technical team. And you need to be the translator, the go-between person between these two stakeholders. Your team will understand vulnerabilities, threats, viruses, malware, etc. But the management team does not understand that. The management team, especially senior management, understands security from a perspective of risk only. So you need to be able to translate what you see at the level of the technical level to a business language that translates to risks and controls and threats. And this is one of the challenges that most CISOs face, and they have to really be able to master very well to be successful at their job. Politics also is important to understand, and not only politics, it's the nature of the job. So think of it this way: most CISOs these days, well, I would say maybe 50%, according to some studies out there, still report to the IT. So if you report into IT, that means you're highlighting the risks that IT may have. But IT's concern is to maximize its objectives, and the objectives are what? Performance, convenience, functionality, etc. for their users, customer centricity. So they need to be always maximizing these objectives, while when you come in as a CISO and point out issues with these, with what they're doing, some risks to these objectives, then they need to address them. And this may impede their progress sometimes, but you have to come at it in a different way. We have a motto or a slogan at information security here at the university that says, "We enable your business securely." And that's extremely important, because we need to be a business enabler and not to be a showstopper in front of other stakeholders, especially within IT. We need to show them that we're like the brakes on a race car. You know, a race car driver is trying to achieve one objective, which is win the race. But they have to have a peace of mind that the brakes on their cars, race car, work very well, because when they hit the curb, they want to be able, they want to be able to ensure that they can press these brakes and not crash into the wall, which is very important. But that peace of mind gives them what? Gives them the ability to speed even further, which means we're enabling them to achieve their business objectives with speed. And that's what I like my fellow IT stakeholders, for example, and other stakeholders within the business to think about security. It is the business enabler and not the showstopper. Having said that, striking this balance between performance and convenience on one side and security on another side is extremely important. So that's what some of the challenges that we have as CISOs. Now, in terms of COVID-19, you need to, basically we were not impacted that much with COVID-19 because business continuity is very essential. As a CISO, you need to also speak the language of business continuity and disaster recovery. You need to be coordinating with your business continuity team at the university and ensure, or at your organization, and ensure that you are always ahead of the game, that you are updating these business continuity plans and disaster recovery plans, so that when something like this hits, like COVID-19, then you'll be ready for it. So for example, some of our VCP items were ensuring that VPN access is working very well. Since we have a lot of travelers, as I mentioned earlier, within the university, then we had looked at that before the COVID-19 crisis came about and ensured that we have great performance on that and no issues with the VPN. And that served us very well, because now everyone is using VPN. Everyone is using two-factor authentication. These are two important now and critical business, let's say, processes that were never critical before. You know, they were somewhat critical, but they're not critical to the running of your business. Now they made it to the top list in your business continuity plan. COVID-19 was tough in multiple aspects. As a matter of fact, a lot of people forget the human element. Not the human element that I talked about earlier, about the human firewall, but the human element of resiliency. We talk about cyber resiliency all the time, but how about human resiliency? When you're asking your employees to work under stress and fear of being infected or God forbid die, and you're pushing them to also do their job very well and stay alert all the time. Given that the increase of cyber threats, they say they increased by 6,000% during this COVID-19 crisis. So in my case, for example, I used to do, I have a wellness program that I started immediately as soon as the crisis started. And I started sending emails and coaching people on a regular basis, on a daily basis, about how staying positive during this crisis, about staying always alert and thinking about this. How do we get out of this all together? The increase of cyber attacks has put a lot of stress on our team, And that made it extremely hard to defend, and also the team needed to make sure that everyone else, and not only them, but everyone else in the community and our user community, that is, aware of these cyber threats, the increased cyber threats. There were attempts of cyber attacks, like in the form of ransomware at our people. We had to constantly make people aware about how to handle ransomware, how to mitigate the ransomware attacks. We encourage them to do daily backups and ensure that they do not click on any links from anyone they don't know, or any suspicious emails. We've created a cybersecurity guide to working from home that we asked people to read. On the other challenges is that we needed to increase our watch on our SOC and ensure that we have the proper use cases that we're looking for. We created more new cases for our SOC to ensure that we're looking for certain anomalies during this time, and the threats that we get on a daily basis from our threat intel databases. We're always fed to our SOC to ensure that we're up to date on the latest threats. They give you a gap analysis of what are your gaps within your organization so that you can fix them. We do comply with ISO 27001, which one of its main pillars is continual improvement. Continual improvement says, okay, you cannot really do the same thing over and over again. You have to improve your processes on a regular basis, on a yearly basis, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why it entices you to review your processes, review your policies, standards, and procedures all the time. So part of this review, we also review our incident management process and incident response process. So part of this liability assessment is to understand also what kind of gaps you have from an incident response. What we do is we hire, for example, a red team, which is basically a team of ethical hackers on a regular basis, probably twice, sometimes 3 times a year, sometimes once a year, but basically more often than not, we do hire them on a yearly basis, and we ask them to try to attack our systems. And we give them basically sometimes a target, sometimes we don't give them a target. Sometimes it's a black box test, sometimes it's a white box test, or even gray box test. And with that, my incident response team does not know anything about it. I'm the only one who deals with that company, and the timing of that attack is only determined by me. This guarantees that my incident response team are always on alert, which is very important, because if I tell them, oh, we're going to conduct a test, they're going to be ready and they're going to be watching all the time during that, and maybe they will relax later on. But no, they're on alert all the time, because at any time during the year, there may be an attack, and that attack may be a regular hacker or a hacker hired by me. KAUST is at the forefront in research. We've announced recently about some research in encryption, for example, encryption algorithms for cybersecurity. But other than that, we're working on, for example, tracing apps for the university, because as I mentioned, the university is not just a university, but a city. And these contact tracing apps allow us to manage the infections and the COVID-19 crisis within the city, within the fences of our university. And that is was important for us to develop, because we have, as I mentioned, 102 nationalities. Some of them come from Europe, some of them come from the US, from India, from China, from Russia, from all over the world, 102 nationalities. And each has certain cultural nuances, if I may call it. On the other hand, IoTs are moving into KAUST. We have various IoTs. We've also developed a strategy for IoT, specifically for securing these IoTs, for a program that we started about a year and a half ago, or about a year ago. We launched it. It's called KAUST Smart Program, and that is basically geared at converting our city into a smart city by employing and deploying smart technologies all over in all facets of life around the city. And that uses also AI and analytics, because it has to collect data for further processing using AI systems. We have used blockchain in a limited, to a limited degree, but not much. But basically, we've been focusing more on IoT because IoTs play a major role in smart cities. But again, they present another threat vector, and they increase or widen our threat surface from a cybersecurity perspective. So we had to put a strategy together from a cybersecurity strategy perspective for IoTs to ensure that when we deploy more of these IoTs in our university, that they are safe and they can serve us, but at the same time can be secure.
For more updates from CXO TV, please like and subscribe to our channel.